Good morning. I am Ruth Van Lillian, the minister of this congregation. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Tuscaloosa, a covenantal community founded on love and a common devotion to our free faith. We recognize all the earth as sacred ground, and we welcome each other into this virtual space. We especially welcome those visiting with us this morning. We are so glad you found us. We invite you to connect with us in the comments or via our website or Facebook page. We join with all member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association in affirming and promoting our 7 principles, including the inherent dignity and worth of all persons, and justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, as well as the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We bear witness to the pain and suffering of persons of color in our communities and across our country, and we continue in our commitment to fight injustice and to search for ways to build a better world. Black Lives Matter.
Good morning. I'm Steve Borelli. I'm the lay service leader for today. If you want to follow along, you can access our order of service through the link below in the comment section. If you're not seeing the comment section or the link, if you're watching us on a smart TV, for example, you can use YouTube. Go to our UU Congregation of Tuscaloosa YouTube channel through the YouTube app on your PC or your smartphone or your tablet. There's also a number of important announcements in the order of service, so I encourage you to read it carefully. Our church website and Facebook page also have information about upcoming online activities. And finally, we have a listserv that's called NewsNet that members and friends can use to keep up to date on church activities. So we leave no stone unturned in trying to keep everybody up to date. We also invite you after the service, immediately following the service, to an online coffee hour, which will enable us to fellowship with each other and build community. You can see the link for the online coffee hour, again, in the comment section below, or if you're on NewsNet, in the email that you received recently about today's service. The prelude prepares us for today's service.
Good morning, we are Tuscaloosa, and we are lighting this morning chalice.
We light the chalice at the beginning of worship to set apart the space for worship, and we invite you at home to light a candle, light a chalice, burn some incense, spray some air freshener, whatever you need to do to set apart this time at home for worship with your community.
We light this chalice as a beacon of our faith and as a reminder of our commitment to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We worship together by celebrating that which is sacred to us individually and collectively.
Our opening words are call and response. Your response is, It is possible to live in peace. These words are from Mahatma Gandhi. If someone with courage and vision can rise to lead in nonviolent action, the winter of despair can, in the twinkling of an eye, be turned into the summer of hope. It is possible to live in peace. Nonviolence is not a garment to put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be an inseparable part of our being. It is possible to live in peace. Nonviolence, which is a quality of the heart, cannot come by an appeal to the brain. It is a plant of slow growth, growing imperceptibly but surely. It is possible to live in peace. If a single person achieves the highest kind of love, it will be sufficient to neutralize the hate of millions. It is possible to live in peace. If we are to reach real peace in this world, and if we are to carry on a real war against war, we shall have to begin with the children. It is possible to live in peace. The future depends on what we do in the present. It is possible to live in peace.
The lone wild bird in lofty flight is still with thee, nor leaves my sight, and I rest in thee, great Spirit, come and rest in me. The ends of earth are in thy hand, the seas dug deep and far of land, and I rest in thee, great Spirit, come and rest in me.
When we gather in loving community, we remember that we do not travel this earth alone. We share our lives as we light candles and hold each other in meditative thought and reverence. I will light a candle in my home as you light a candle in yours, and we will observe a moment of silence while you share your joys and burdens in the comments below and engage with each other in celebration and condolences. I will now light a final candle for all those burdens and celebrations shared in our virtual spaces, and for those that went unspoken. May the warm light of these flames bring us peace.
Let's spend a moment in silent meditation as we think of the joys and concerns that have been shared and those that went unspoken. And then I'll close us with a few words. We are born into the middle of the human story, and we will leave in the middle. We cannot change what came before, and we will not be a part of what comes after. Let us make the most of our middle. May our middle make the story matter. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be. Good morning. I'm so glad that you're with us this morning. Look what I brought. A mirror. It's probably showing you the camera that I'm talking to right now. If I hold it this way, ooh, I can see myself. There I am. Oh, how pretty. I bet you have mirrors at home. Did you know that when you look at yourself in the mirror, you are not seeing yourself the way other people see you? You are seeing a reflection, which means that your left and right sides are reversed in the mirror. And you know this because if you look in the mirror and you raise your right hand, it looks like your left hand in the mirror, and the same for the other side. So you're seeing a reverse image of yourself. In the same way, when other people see you, they are seeing what you actually look like. They're not seeing it the same way. If you want to see what you look like to others, you have to look at a photograph or a picture on mom or dad's cell phone. That is how other people see you. Now, what's really interesting is to get the mirror up on one side and a really good picture of you on the other side. And then compare. See if you can see some differences between your reflection and the image everyone else looks at. In the same way, the things that are going on inside of us are not always obvious as the appearance that we give on the outside. So people see our outside, but they may not see what's going on inside, our thoughts, our feelings. For instance, you might be in a situation where you feel kind of nervous or scared, but you don't want people to know that. So instead, maybe you act silly to cover it up. And so then people won't know you're feeling scared. Or maybe you meet someone for the first time, someone who's in a new situation, and maybe they look mean or angry. But maybe what's really going on inside is they're feeling scared and nervous, and they're shy, and so they don't want you to know, so they sort of shut down. It's important when we interact with each other to remember this, that what we see on the outside doesn't always match what's going on inside someone, and that can help us to be more understanding and more patient and more kind with each other. So, get your mirror out and check out your image, compare it to a photograph. That'll be fun. And remember, as you interact with your family and your friends, to be kind, because what you see on the outside doesn't always match what's going on the inside. Have a good week.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Out of gratitude for all we've been given and all we have now, we share our resources because we love and trust one another, and because this church enriches our lives and empowers us to make our whole world better. We rely upon each other, members and friends, and we appreciate the payment of pledges and generous donations to support the legacy, vision, and work of this church community. Contributions may be made through PayPal by using the link below in the description, or by mailing checks to UUCT. All undesignated contributions will be divided between our Split the Plate partner and our congregation. Our Split the Plate partner for this month is shown on the screen as you're listening to this. Please mark your pledge payment to UUCT in the comments field on PayPal or the memo line of your check. If you prefer to write a check directly to our partner organization, please mail it directly to the address we include in the description of this video. The offertory music will continue in this window as you open a new window to make your contributions. By the generosity of our hearts and the work of our hands, our love is made real. Thank you for your generous gifts.
Good morning. I was at my first General Assembly in New Orleans in June of 2017. There was so much to take in. It had been a long time since I had attended a large conference. As I studied the handbook and walked around, I discovered a special room reserved for the exclusive use of persons of color. I'd never heard of such a thing. Visions of segregation came to mind. I wondered briefly if there was a room reserved for whites only. Well, of course not. I told myself that would be contradictory to our principles and our history, but I was confused and uncomfortable. During the orientation for new delegates, my internal questions were answered. They explained that persons of color often struggle to interact in an environment that is largely attended by white folk. No matter how nice or well-intentioned people racialized as white are, it takes a lot of energy to be the outsider and to endure the multiple microaggressions thrown out relentlessly in such a setting. People of color get exhausted from being the tokens, from being targeted or ignored in turn. They need a space for themselves to be able to relax and breathe. They need a designated place safe from white intrusion. Wow, I had never considered this before. Could this also be true at my church? A few years later, at a different gathering, I spoke with a couple of African American UUs who attended the same church and asked if they had such an organized group just for the people of color in their congregation. They looked at me like I was crazy and shook their heads incredulously. But don't you think you could benefit from having such a space for yourselves? They smiled at me with something like pity. Sure, one of them answered, but it would scare the white folks to death. Now, why should that be? Imagine if UUCT had a group designated as the People of Color group. This also works for LGBTQ folk or people with disabilities. What if they held meetings just for themselves? Would that be a problem for those of us who are racialized as white? Consider that we already have several groups just for folk who identify as female. We have had a group for those who identify as male. We have had groups designated for various ages. So why should groups for those with traditionally marginalized identities be a problem? The Widening the Circle of Concern report from the Commission on Institutional Change created by the UUA recommends that marginalized persons have their space and their groups in order to feel more fully welcomed into UU congregations. When a person of color looks at the church website or Facebook page and notices a Black, Indigenous, and persons of color group meeting, they immediately know that the people in this congregation know something about hospitality to marginalized persons. They are far more likely to gather the courage to try out that church. Let's talk about microaggressions. The Widening report offers an explanation and some examples of microaggressions. Microaggression is a term coined by psychologist Dr. Daryl Wing Sue, and it refers to a comment or behavior that objectifies or demeans someone because of their culturally marginalized identity. Microaggressions are often unintentional, but can cause serious psychological and spiritual harm over time. The effect known as death by 1,000 paper cuts. Examples of common microaggressions in UU spaces include, where are you really from? Making the assumption about ethnic origins based on appearance. For instance, many people who look Asian were born and raised in Ohio and other states. You must be new to Unitarian Universalism, assuming that a non-white person couldn't already be a UU. You speak English so well. You fit into my world and meet my standards. Congratulations. Welcome. Do you want to join the racial justice team? This assumes a non-white person would only be interested in such a role. Maybe they'd like yoga better. Oh, I just have to touch your child's hair. This is not a compliment. It is a gross violation of personal space and especially threatening to a visitor's children. Hands off. Persons of color and, well, everyone else too. No touchy-feely unless you know someone really well. Well, what are you boys up to? This is a microaggression I made once when speaking flippantly to 2 grown black men in my church. My intentions were irrelevant. Calling a black man a boy in any context is extremely insensitive. At a time when we at this church are asking very significant questions about who we are as a congregation and what we want for our future together, we need to consider that future through the lens of radical hospitality. It is not enough to say to ourselves that we welcome everyone and our doors are open to whomever wishes to walk in. It takes courage for any visitor to walk into a new church. But for white, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied, educated persons of adequate means, our congregation provides a pretty comfortable space. A visitor with a marginalized identity comes in looking for immediate signs that our congregation gets it, that we are at least somewhat woke to the realities of such marginalization. They cannot assume such a radical welcome. They have to see it and experience it. Traditionally marginalized people encounter suspicion and rejection every day, if not worse. People of color are not interested in attending services where they experience similar treatment, and why would they be? It is incumbent upon us to create the welcome they are seeking. If we really want an inclusive congregation which reflects the variety of the larger community, then we must practice radical hospitality. We need training for all our leaders in such practices, and we need to increase our congregational, multicultural competence. We also need to consider our varied theologies and beliefs and make changes to create more welcoming worship. A colleague of mine told the story that when going through candidacy interviews during her search process, she was told by a committee member that he was an atheist and he never wanted to hear the word God in church again. She responded with a sigh that such practice would almost certainly keep many people of color out of their church. No racial group is a monolith, to be sure. People of color certainly express a wide variety of beliefs and worship practices. However, it is also true that many African American persons who are interested in attending church came out of traditions where God language was common and comforting, where worship was loud and lively, and where the church community was central to their daily lives. If we truly wish to be an inclusive community, we need to consider how our worship experience may exclude people with non-white racialized identities. It is not coincidental that some call Unitarian Universalists the frozen chosen. The Widening the Circle report recommends that congregations encourage their members who identify as part of a marginalized community to seek and attend regional and national gatherings of Unitarian Universalists who identify similarly. There are several national UU organizations for Black, Indigenous, and other persons of color, which convene such gatherings every year, and regional and local cluster meetings are also possible. Further, the recommendation is to establish funds for scholarships to attend such gatherings and for local churches to include funding in their budgets to enable their own members to attend such meetings. The Widening report adds that they heard from many of those interviewed about how life-saving it is to be able to be with other Unitarian Universalists with similar identities to their own. For white, able-bodied, straight, cisgender Unitarian Universalists with means, this may seem puzzling because they do not understand what a struggle attendance at a congregation can be when microaggressions and assumptions damage one's sense of belonging. Across the denomination, UUs of color frequently report that they are the only or one of a very few non-white persons in their congregation. In his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram X. Kendi states, "The opposite of racist isn't not racist. It's anti-racist." What's the difference? Well, one endorses either the idea of a racial hierarchy as a racist or racial equality as an anti-racist. One either believes problems are rooted in groups of people as a racist or locates the roots of problems in power and policies as an anti-racist. One either allows racial inequities to persevere as a racist or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. There is no in-between safe space. There's no not racist. We cannot assume that because in some elevated intellectual capacity we believe everyone is equal, that makes us not racist. We cannot merely espouse the UU principles and think that makes us not racist. We cannot, as a congregation, say that we welcome everyone and think that makes us a not racist church. As the old saying goes, Either we are part of the problem or part of the solution. Either we are intentionally incorporating anti-racism into every part of our congregational life, or we are at best unintentionally allowing our racism to influence our community to keep comfortable those of us who are racialized as white. And what of those few brave, stalwart souls among us who identify as people of color, and those who identify as LGBTQ and as disabled, or perhaps a combination of those? Well, I am grateful, deeply grateful, that they put up with me as their minister when I make so many mistakes and commit microaggressions. And I am grateful when they are willing to risk sharing their thoughts and experiences with me. It is not their job to educate me. It is not their job to educate us. All of us who identify as white, able-bodied, cisgender, heterosexual persons of adequate means have the responsibility for educating ourselves about how to practice anti-racism. Please don't ask anyone who identifies as marginalized to explain things to you. That's just another microaggression. The Widening Circle of Concern report has a lot to say about how UUs have failed to create inclusive community at every level, and how we can turn from our current path to a new paradigm of beloved community where all are really welcome and included. As we at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Tuscaloosa continue on our journey together and engage with the questions of who we are and who we want to be, let us consider how we might practice radical hospitality and how we might learn to incorporate anti-racism into our church life as a means of living out the UU principles we hold so dear. Amen. Shalom. Blessed be.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. In that land where I'm bound.
Please say our chalice extinguishing words with us.
As we extinguish this chalice flame, let us remember that we carry the light within ourselves, which brings healing to a broken world and hope for the days ahead.
Siblings and kindred, let's be the somewhere that we are singing about. Let us reimagine and recreate ourselves as a real community for everyone. Let us go in peace. Amen.